All right. I agree with what he said in the previous talk. It will be broken into 3 phases, but whereas he danced with it slowly like a Western gentleman, we are going to attack the subject like a spider monkey on a Subway sandwich. So my down slide is not working. Is it? Yeah, I gotta put it in.
Yeah.
Oh, there. Okay. All right. So it's gonna work. Yeah, it'll work now. All right. Early card talk. This was a very poorly named speech because I was kind of doing it in a early thought process. But when people were mapping the Earth to begin with, they made their star charts first, and they used their reference of, this star is at this position in the sky, therefore I know this mountain is this position on Earth. So we're going to basically do a set of business canvases of what are our reference points, because you make your star charts in port, you don't do it in the field. So we're in port now. We're going to figure out how we map things in terms of chemistry, business, economics, and so forth. I've had this chart for years in my presentations, but it stops at settlement. And I thought, what's the next phase? We need to start talking about independence. Because if we're going to be a multi-planet species with a separate, equivalent civilization, we need to start thinking in those terms. So, as I said, this is going to be sort of it's going to be a set of business canvases, except they're not going to be business, they're going to be biology and other things, but we're going to work from first principles all the way down to life itself. So this is a version of the Drake equation as a graphic that I came up with a few years ago. And we're going to actually run this backwards as an engineering problem instead of forwards as a scientific problem. We're going to become the external civilization. So we start with, how far back in evolution do we have to go to start on a sterile world? How far back in technology do we have to go to start up on an uninhabited world? And how can you accelerate that to become a pure world with the Earth as quickly as possible? So this comes down to an habitability, the biology of human beings, and our humanity. How do we not simply function as livestock, but as a human race that is equivalent? So we're going to start with the habitability problem. Any environment border has a dynamic between it. So like the coastline of the water and the land, there's the tides that flow back and forth. At the edge of a forest in the field, you have different solar dynamics when it comes to one heats up slower and one heats up faster. Every day-night cycle, these try to go back into equilibrium on both sides. And this is an energy force that can be taken advantage of. So when you're talking about a habitation versus a sterile outside of the dome, so to speak, you can take advantage of these to help drive an ecosystem. Again, I'm designing from first principles here. So what is life? We're on to biology. So the biology textbooks in your freshman class says there's cellular life functions, metabolism, homeostasis, and so forth. And then there's a separate list, which is organisms. I really have to get these contact lenses fixed. I was just looking at the word. Now I'm going to be on YouTube even more than I thought. Yes, I do. Please, for God's sake, edit that one. You won't, though. I think you won't. So if we compress this down, now you're all awake. Okay, good. So if we compress this down into a single abstract list, that was the shallowest joke on the deepest topic you're having. All these functions work together I'm making a harmonized list here of abstracts, but the original list is basically, is this alive or is this dead in real time? It doesn't tell you if it's going to be alive 5 minutes from now. So in green, I added adaptation and efficiency as key life functions, because adaptation, you have to be able to survive when the environment changes. And efficiency, efficiency has been a core tenet of life as long as there's been life. Getting mitochondria, converting oxygen, into an energy source instead of a poison. Sunlight, all the glucose conversion, all these things were efficiency functions, even at the one cell level. And ever since then, if I look at the nature of technology revolutions and so forth in a minute, you'll see that it's been a factor all through human history as well. So let's break this down into columns off of that. We have information, energy and matter is the higher level, which is all these metabolic functions have a external interaction. How do you interact with things outside of your body? Energy management within your body and how you interrelate to the environment, and then repair and replacement, reproduction of the body itself. As I said, this is all of human history in one slide. So everything has come down to, there's a new energy system. How do we take advantage of it? There's a whole set of inventions. What do those do to life? There's a new information mapping system. How does that work together? And then it goes beyond that, because when you go to a technology revolution, those first three things are historic. But in the moment, there are things like affordability, because if we don't have it, if it isn't affordable, we can't do it 1,000 times. We can't do it at a more democratized level. And then excitement, because nobody wants to work on boring technology. This is the main thing with SpaceX. This is big reason why we're here, is because it's all very exciting, isn't it? So think of this as like a human life. There's inception, from conception to birth. There's establishment, our childhood, when we learn how to do things, and there's acceleration going forward. What he just said in the talk before this is perfectly true. There's first landing. There's getting the minimum base and learning your cutting your teeth on the new thing as an apprentice. And then there's becoming a master of something to where you're producing more than you're consuming. So we'll start with the inception phase. We're getting into these maps now. There's this is sort of like a wind triangle. It's a vector equation essentially. So wind triangle is the most basic thing in aerodynamics. Is if you're flying this way with a plane and the wind is blowing this way, then you're going to end up over there. So you have to compensate for it. So this would be energy and work is one function of capacity, and then time and industrial capacity on the other side. You want your work and your industrial capacity to match, because otherwise it's inefficient, going back to the life function. You want your energy and time to match, same thing. So we map this to a broader map here, where starting at deep space at the top and then our living space at the bottom, this is our habitability gradient. And then going through information, energy, gas, liquid, solid, the states of matter. We're trying to go from something that's in deep space all the way down to our living space on the surface of Mars. So this is essentially our grid for that sort of thing. So this is Mars Direct. We started with the idea of, let's bring hydrogen from Earth, gas to liquid, bring it all the way to Earth and add it to the process. So down there in green. Then we discovered, oh, there's underground glaciers near mid-latitudes. You don't even need to do the math on this to see that black thing going over there that's ore minized from local glaciers is a much shorter path. It's a much more efficient path. So, and then the CO2 extraction from the atmosphere. So this is an extremely crude map over the top of this thing. But what you would have is, if you were doing this at an industrial level, you wouldn't necessarily have gas, liquid, and solid, but you would sort them that way so that all the charts would be consistent. So you would have, okay, I'm working out this problem for this resource or whatever, and you would take it all the way from deep space to the living space. This is your goal, getting the resources into the body of the settlement. So beauty of this is it works the other direction as well. I have an idea in my living room. I have an idea for SpaceX. I'm going to build a factory for SpaceX. I'm going to enter deep space. So starting on Earth, going out to deep space, the exact same chart backwards. Deep space is your interface at the top. It's the magnet by which you stick these things together. So we can take a single economic model all the way from as few companies on Earth against each other and so forth, and then all the way to the moon, Mars, whatever, all one economic model, all one map. And we discover something on Ceres, just add another table. It's all good. So establishment. This is kind of interesting because there's two possible approaches we talk about. There's a slow approach of like when an island is like a volcanic island appears, and then the ferns and the early birds and stuff start moving in. It's very, very, very slowly turns into a tropical paradise. And then, so this flow chart here is like, if you were going to build something very slowly like that in a series of domes and lava cubes or whatever, this is the steps you'd have to go through. I'm not going to belabor that because we don't have time. Now there's the fast approach. This was a military base this is Thule Air Base in Greenland. It was built in 4 months in 1953 in secret. And it was the equivalent to building the Panama Canal. It totally blows away what they're doing at Boca Chica in terms of construction rate. It was done by a combination of the Navy, Air Force, and Army. So, and if you look at video of this online, it's just amazing how much they did, how quickly. And it's still there, it's still functioning days. When you build something big bang approach like that, all we're adding is one layer to the slow approach. It's go in, boom, and then you still have the same problems at the front and solutions at the back. So what I'm proposing is a mixed approach, a hybrid approach. You start with your big bang base, essentially. You come in and do that. But then around that, you start your slow approach. You build things in layers like the cells of a shell. And then you can, from there, slowly build independence out. So that doesn't have to just be horizontally in the seashell. It can be vertically. We can have a layer of a greenhouse that's at 1/2 atmosphere above a more industrial section underneath. And then these are some prettier slides of that because I have them now. This was a presentation from 2 years ago. So your factories are underground, Morlocks not included. So somebody got the joke. So we finally have a column over there on autonomy with food, medical, construction, and so forth, all the way down to genomic and autonomy of having essentially a Turing complete ecosystem. So the term, we'll get back to the term Turing complete in a minute. So what about independence? So this is a vector map of at the top left, everything is imported all down to the raw materials. And then at the bottom, everything is peer level to earth and everything, all the way down to AWS. And these are different levels. And this is from industry, by the way. So different countries, for example, are at different levels on this chart. So, can you take the raw materials? Can you refine them in-house? Can you repair things that you brought from earth? Can you encase them? Can you buy the core parts and then encase them in a case, and all you're making is the case? Substitute products, minimal products, manual processes around it, computer-aided work, automated work, and then finally artificial intelligence. So we're trying to get to the bottom corner of that. Now, think of every cell in that chart as its own, essentially, business box. So what you're trying to do, if you build a business at a particular cell, you're bringing resources from above and below, or above and to the left, and you're trimming them to the ones below and to the right. So you have all these different fabrication type things, and we have the idea of Turing complete. Turing complete is a computer term that basically means you have a computer language that can do everything that classical computing function can do. Once you have something with that many, cards in the deck, you can play all the games, essentially. So if it has more than that, it's a waste. If it has less than that, you can't do nearly as much. There's a sweet spot when it has just enough complexity as a language to do everything you need. So we need that for industrial capacity. Why did all these companies start in a garage? And we can add the Wright brothers to this list. We can talk about the glassworks in Renaissance Italy and Venice, where they told all the glass workers, go to that island over there so you stop setting fires to the town, please. And then they ended up creating optical glass because all the best talent was in one spot. So why does this work? So you have a team of like 5 to 20 people. I'm going to just cut to the chase on this. I'm going to call this a minimum industrial modular operation, or MIMO. I'll come up with a better name someday. This is just what I had in time for. So you have 5 to 20 people, precision equipment in a 40-foot shipping container equivalent. You'd move into a warehouse that was maybe 1,000 cubic meters. The ability to just turn on electricity and data inputs within that shelter. You'd have a roadmap for getting your business to 3x capacity. If you brought in a new shipping container, you should more than double the capacity because you're using local resources and cooperation with other companies down the range. So this is practically a book in itself, but this is if you broke down all the aspects of a startup in Silicon Valley or whatever, it's modular inputs, tooling, a finite team, small team, small space, very rapid assembly, ready access to skilled labor and competition, ubiquitous and affordable utilities, in other words, electricity and so forth, And then to keep it going, you need what's what I call a Turing complete workbench. You know, it's the old joke about 3 chords and the truth is all you need to start a rock band. You know, if you can do an entire album catalog with just a few things. We want to know what are the few things for your industry to make that work. You need a fully knowable toolbox. A lot of the computer revolution came because people had, you know, they'd have the computer manual for their Apple IIe that was this thick, and when they got to the end of the book, it's like, what's next? It's whatever you want it to be. Now, if you're a programmer nowadays and you're on Amazon Web Services, what's next? Oh, there's whole nother applications and stuff. You never get to the end of the map. You're always in somebody else's world. You're not making your own. So we need things to be finite enough that you can master them instead of just being another character in somebody else's game. So this would be, you know, so atmospheric processing, you know, basic drilling, things like that. We would work through these things in modular systems that would integrate together. And then ultimately, we want something in terms of economic independence. We want a foundation that would come between Earth and Mars and the outside things. It would be like the autoclave airlock to keep the, you know, a lot of the crazy systems on Earth from getting into a system that was made for rapid acceleration, simply because we can't afford to be filling out 500 pages of paperwork when the airlock is not working properly, that sort of thing. We need to get things done in a hurry. So things would be very abrupt like that. So that's all I've got. That went much faster than I thought. So any questions? And by the way, if you scan this, this goes to a website with all my other designs and so forth. So if you're like, oh, that was a pretty graphic, what was that? Go look at some of my other talks from past years.
Thanks again, Ken. In his famous book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Heinlein came up with the idea of a moon that was trying to get independence from Earth. And one of the things that they had was the ability to ship raw materials to Earth. And the computer, which was an AI, came up with the idea of using that to ship rocks as weapons to Earth to gain their independence. What sort of shocking transitions do we have between what the Earthers will do to the Martians and what the Martians will do to the Earthers that fit inside of this model?
That's a good question. It's completely, this presentation is entirely mute on that point. But if you're getting to my general idea is there tends to be a thing of licensing and regulations and so forth. What I would do with this foundation is, you know, taxation and things like that, stop at the water's edge, as it were. America is one of only 2 countries in the world that still tax you if you actually leave the country permanently. The other one's like Eritrea, and then we're the only one. The whole thing of a departure tax, where you're a billionaire and you move to another country and you're supposed to leave your money behind, was come up with by Chuck Schumer. He should know better, because the original tax like that was on Jews leaving Nazi Germany. Like, you know, not a good example. So we, you know, in this country, we have some horrible situations like that, and we've gotten used to it. This would basically, the idea here would be a firewall to prevent stuff like that from going forward. But that's purely at the political level and the taxation level and so forth. I don't think you should be, you know, I think once you have, if you have a garage and you walk in with a block of wood, you could burn that block of wood for $0, or you could carve a masterpiece worth $1 million. I don't think it's the IRS's business until you open the garage door what you did with that wood. You know, and I think that the rest of the universe is that garage in this case.
Suppose Chuck Schumer is put in charge of all space colonies.
I don't think he'll be around that long, but I get the idea.
I'm just saying, on like a what if scenario, suppose Earth decides to tax Mars and the asteroid belt a lot.
Yeah, we've seen that. yeah, again, it's down to, okay, how much authority do you really have in a place that is not your territory? Are you taxing territory that it's like, there was a thing where I think it was like a Native American group said they were like, where I grew up, there's a Native American burial ground, and Native Americans from 1,000 miles away, I lived there, my family lived there since the 1800s. 1,000 miles away, come in and say, that's native land, you should cover this up. So they did. Then another, okay, fine, whatever. Then another, when they buried Shoemaker, they put some of his ashes on one of the probes that went to the moon, and they crashed on the moon. So the first person was buried on the moon. Some Native American group said, oh, the moon is sacred territory to us. It's like, it's not yours. So there's got to be a point where the government should understand that it's like, if it was never your territory, that they treat Americans as possessions, as property. And I don't think that that's the right way to look at things. I hope we have a revolution on that point of contention on, are people property or are they independent souls? And in this country, we should know that better, before we get to any of these situations. Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with work by Casey Hemner about Mars industrialization, but he talks there sort of that to get economic independence, to get that full stack of technology, it's a very, very high bar. Right now, the smallest countries that have that are 100 billion or more. Kind of what are the steps and necessary things that need to happen as you go from the first hundreds to the hundreds of thousands to climb up that ladder, of scale and technological scale?
I did have an extra slide, and apparently I cut it out of this version of the presentation. I give an example of that. You're going to have workarounds that back to that substitute good thing. You're going to have workarounds where you have extremely low-tech versions of high-tech products, and that's going to be a major source of innovation for a Mars colony. One of the things that's come up recently is China cannot make high-tech chips, and that's a nation of 1 billion people. Why? Because Taiwan has all the fabrication. How does Taiwan have the fabrication? Because a company in, I think, Denmark makes the fabricators. How does the company in Denmark have the fabricators? Because there's a company in Germany that makes the mirrors that makes fabricators work. One. Everything is based on that. So you could theoretically move the 3 companies over and have something better than an entire country of 1 billion people. But it's also horrifying that there's only 3 companies that everything in the world more advanced than a Raspberry Pi is dependent on.
More questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.